Before we are going to move on to our editing project feature and user story, I want to go ahead and investigate this modal closes when a feature changes column, okay? The more I'm working with it, the more I just feel like I just don't like it, okay? So I'm gonna have to relog in. And let's take a look at things. All right, let's do this one, feature 3. Okay, so if I move this, right, I moved the task, and because the feature 3 changes columns at that point, then everything, the modal closes, and I don't like that. So let's start with some investigation into why this is happening, okay? So the feature modal is being called within the feature box, okay? So if I set a project, okay, and then, well, let's go back another step then. So then feature box is being called within project, right? So the way it's working is we're mapping through the columns, and then we're mapping through the project features, okay? And then we have this statement here that if column name is equal to feature status, that's where we're putting it, right? Because then feature modal is within feature box, okay? Then when this reloads, the box gets reloaded and the box moves when the status changes, because the feature status is changing, okay? So there's the first direction I looked into was changing where the use disclosure hook is. I was thinking, okay, well, if I move the use disclosure hook up a few elements and then pass those props down, then the feature modal won't change. But when I tried that last night, it just didn't, it looked even buggier. It kind of flashed type of a thing. So that wasn't great. So decided that wasn't going to work. I tried putting it into context, in my outlet context, and then passing it through context, and that did the same flashing, not good user experience, right? So here's what I'm gonna do instead, okay? Let's get out of project feature modal, oops, sorry about that. And let's go to our task box, okay? So right now what we're doing is we are updating the project with the response. So I'm gonna comment that out, and I'm gonna see, because I think that's my updating the project, right, is what's changing where the feature column goes. So if I look at it now, if I update this to in progress, it doesn't move, okay? But also, if I update this to done, okay, it doesn't move, but then my user story isn't updating, and you can still see that feature 3 is in to do. I'm okay with feature 3 being in to do right now, but here's my idea. My idea is that instead of returning the project, the updated project back, I just need to update this status because I'm on the modal, right? So, and then what I want to do is when I close the modal, okay, I want it to get the update the project on close, like kind of how I just refreshed, because this page, when I load the page, gets the updated project, okay? I want to get the updated project when I close the modal. When I'm hitting my update status, right, I just need to update the information that I have in the modal, okay? And the only thing that needs to change when I update my status is the user story status, okay? All right, so let's look into that then. Instead of sending back the project and updating the project, we specifically want to update this status here, okay? So let's look into where that is coming from, okay? All right, so the only thing within task box, which makes sense because this is the task box, is the task, okay? So we're gonna have to look one level above, which is in user story details accordion, which is in this, okay? And here we see that we're passing in a status, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a state, const user, let's just call this story status, set story status. then my original state is I'm going to use whatever is passed in. Okay? And this status is updated whenever the project is updated, okay? So my idea is that I am going to update, instead of using status here, I'm going to use story status, my state, okay? And then whenever I change this, my idea is I'm going to pass the set story status to the create task accordion, and I'm going to change it. And so that way it's going to update there, okay? So let's pass it. I said create task accordion. I'm being silly. What I want to pass here is set story status to my task box so I can change it within the task box. So story status. All right, so then I need to change it here. Also, this took me, I would say, about an hour last night of trying different ideas and doing some research. I looked into Chakra UI's modal. I looked into why the parent element changing state would change it, and that's where I got the moving up the disclosure hook. Ultimately, this is like the solution that I came up with in that hour, but I didn't know how long it was going to take me, so that's why I didn't record that. But just know, like, if you wouldn't have come up with the solution in like 5 seconds, like, that is okay. It took me a while to come up with it. Okay, so we are then now going to hard code this just to see if it works. Okay, so let's go into feature 3. It's in progress right now. When I click it, it's going to go to done. Okay, so we're going to say set story status to 1 out of 1. And we're just going to see if this changes, okay? So I'm going to click, and this changed to 1 out of 1. And that's perfect, okay? Then the idea is when I close the modal here, I want it then to update my project, okay? So it didn't update it yet, okay? I can look at this, though, on refresh and see how it updates on refresh. All right, so let's go ahead and make that work. So because I know it updates correctly in refresh, and I know that's through my router, I'm actually going to go and look at my project ID path, and I'm going to get the loader function out of it, okay? So I'm just going to grab my axios.get function here, this, and I'm going to need my token too, okay? So I need to find where I open that modal, which is in feature box, okay? And here I'm going to need to create a const on close modal function. And so this is going to do, it's going to make this request here when I close my modal, okay? So const token is equal to local storage dot get item token, okay? And then we're not passing in params at ID, but we do have the project ID passed into the component. So we'll do project ID, okay? And we already have set project. So then we can do dot then response. And then we're gonna say set project equal to response dot data, okay? We also want to close the modal. So after that, then we will also call the on close function, okay? And then we will replace this with on close modal. So basically, this is saying when I hit this close button, it's gonna update my project, okay? So let's go ahead and change this. All right, so this should all be updated. Okay, so now when I click in progress, it's gonna change this to the hard-coded 1 out of 1, okay? Perfect. And then when I close my modal, you should see that this feature is going to go into the done column. Woo, woo. All right, so we have the front end work done now, so that is exciting, but we need to go ahead and, let's go ahead and get rid of this set project because we don't need it here. We also don't need it passed into the props. So let's clean this up a little bit, but we have to actually go get the status on the back end now. Okay, and then that comes from user details. All right, cleaned up. Okay, so now we need to return to the back end. Okay, so task box. Let's go and look at what we're calling here. We're calling update task. Okay. All right, I'm also thinking we should probably add our catch error. So I'm gonna grab this block. Let me copy it and then let me look at what the block is. Okay, so let's go back to, where was that feature box? All right, so then let's add const toast is equal to use toast. And then we need to navigate as well. Okay, so we're saying catch error. If we get an error and the error is that we're unauthorized, then that likely means that we tried to make this request at the same moment that our token expired. So it's going to redirect us. If the error is anything else, we can say there was an error updating your project. Please try again. Please reload the page. Okay, so that should be good. So let's give that a try. I'm going to mark this as done. I'm going to, and you can see it reloads. Okay, nice. All right. What was I doing next? Oh, back end. I don't know where my brain just went. All right, so now on the back end, we need to update our update task route, okay? So right now, we are finding the task based on the task ID and the user ID, and then we're getting back all of these relations, okay, in order to get back that project ID, because that's what we're returning. But we want to edit this because we don't actually care about the project ID anymore. All we care about is the user story ID, okay? So we are going to get this backed up, and we are going to do, for relations, we want user stories dot task. So we want to get the user story back, okay? And then we also want to get the corresponding tasks related to it, okay? All right, then we're going to say this is the same, right? If task to update, we're going to update the field in question, and then we're going to save it, okay? And then we are going to return the task to update user story, and we can get rid of this .feature.project because we just want .id, okay? I actually don't think at this point, because we're going to go get it, so I don't think we need the tasks here. We just need the user story so we can get the ID, okay? So that is how we're going to edit our tasks function. We want the user story ID instead. Okay, so let's go and check that that's what we're getting. Okay, and we are going to do, let's add a console log here. Let's do task to update dot user story. Okay, so if I edit this, we're getting our user story back. You can see the user story is ID 40, and it corresponds to US1, which makes sense. And then description is blank, which makes sense. So this seems like the correct user story. And then now we're having issues because we haven't edited the function that called this, right? So before task service was update task and auth service. Okay, so we're gonna head over there, and that way we can edit our update task function from there. Okay, so here we're getting a project ID back, but that's not actually what we want to do. Now we have a user story ID coming back. Okay, and we want to edit this now. We don't actually want to call the project service anymore. We want to call user story service dot get user story status by ID, and then we are going to pass in the user story ID. Now this function doesn't exist yet, so we have to create it, but let's go do that. All right, so we want to do async get user story status by ID, and then ID is going to be a number. All right, and let's just start with console.log the ID that comes in. Okay, so I edit my status and ID 40. Perfect, that makes sense. That is exactly what we are looking for. All right, so now what we want to do is we actually want to go get that user story from that ID. So we're going to say const user story is equal to await this dot user stories repository dot find one, and then we're going to find one where ID. Okay, and we want to, so let's start with that. Okay, all right, let's take a look. We change the task and we get our ID, name, and description. The issue with this though is what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the user status, the user story status. And the way we determine the user status is we need to know how many tasks are completed out of how many tasks total. Okay, so we need to add to our query the relations so that way we can get our tasks as well. Okay, so now if I load, now you see that the tasks that correspond to that user story come up. Okay, so we have one task, all right, and we have the status of it, which is to do. Okay, so what we can do then is we can say const tasks is going to be equal to user story dot tasks. Okay, so we're going to say task count is going to be equal to user story is going to be equal to tasks dot length. Okay, and then we're going to say tasks completed tasks is going to be equal to tasks dot filter task. So we're going to look at over each task, and we are going to return task dot status is equal to done. Okay, and then we are going to say const completed tasks length is going to be equal to completed tasks dot length. And we could have done this in a lot less code, but I just want to kind of show exactly what we're doing here. All right, so then let's go ahead and console log instead status, and we are going to say completed task length. Okay, and then we're going to say out of, and then we're going to say task count. Okay, so if I go to in progress 0 out of 1, that makes sense. If I go to done 1 out of 1, that makes sense. To do 0 out of 1, that makes sense. Okay, so now instead of console logging it, I can just return that. Okay, so I'm going to say return, and then I'm going to do my backticks, and then I'm going to say completed tasks length out of task count. Okay, And so now we should be getting back the status here. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go all the way up to, let's go look at auth service. Okay, yeah, so it's returning what we got from there, so that makes sense. All right, so let's get out of the back end then, because I think we are done. And let's go back to our task box, okay? And let's remove this hard-coded data, and let's say we want to set it with response.data, okay? So now let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, I'm gonna refresh my page, make sure everything's updated, and let's go back to feature 3. Okay, so this is to do, now it is in progress. Okay, so if I close the page, it's gonna update. So it makes sense that it didn't update this because to do would be 0 out of 1 and in progress would be 0 out of 1, so that's good. And then when we close the page, it should update our project. So feature 3 should move to in progress column, perfect. All right, now let's look at it again. Move it to done. Now our user story is 1 out of 1, okay? I should close this and feature 3 should move to done. Perfect. All right, let's do a more complicated example. Let's look at feature 2, which has 2 user stories, okay? So it's in progress because woohoo, we made it to task 1 is in progress. So let's move this to done, okay? And you see 1 out of 2, and this should still be in progress, okay? Let's move them all to do, okay? So they're all in to do now, so feature 1 should be in the to do column when I click X, which it is. All right, now let's move them all to done. All right, that works as intended. That works as intended, and now feature 1 should be in done. Perfect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that pesky console log. I don't need to see my ID every single time. And I'm going to end the video here. So we have successfully investigated our modal closing when a feature changes column. All right. In the next video, we will move on to one of our other user stories. All right. See you later.